It has been a very, very busy week here on Spits and Suds. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan. If you haven't already, please check out Stars President and CEO Brad Alberts. That was a terrific interview. We followed that up with Mike Eruzione because it's the Olympics. And when you think of great USA Olympians that made a difference, Mike Eruzione is certainly towards the top along with Team USA. Great hearing some old stories about Neil Broughton, as well as just the spontaneous moment of inviting everyone up on the podium, which has now led to bigger podiums. And we also talked Jake Oettinger, since Eruzione is heavily involved with Boston University. Yesterday we talked with Mike Heika, but right now we probably have the biggest star of the week because those guys aren't movie stars like Sean Shapiro from the Late Game movie, from D Magazine, from EP Ringside, and his Substack is Shap Shots, and he joins us for his weekly visit. He's our NHL insider. How are you, my friend?
Doing really well there, Gavin. We've got I'm doing really well. I'm enjoying a little bit of slow time this week, getting caught up on some things, but I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy this week and happy to be chatting with you, so I can't complain.
I mean, your hype man just put you over Mike Eruzione, so how's that?
I mean, that feels pretty good. So.
All right, Sean has a latest article on D Magazine, and you know what we do on Spits and Suds to support our guys. So click on the article and then click. And Sean has tweeted it out, so please retweet it, and it is a good one as always. The title, Jake Oettinger, the Stars, and the chase for the best American goalie. Now, that is coupled with NHL.com and the NHL Network. They're coming out tonight at 5 on NHL Network. They're coming out with their top goalies entering this NHL season. So let's start with the D Magazine article, how this came about, Sean.
Yeah, honestly, it was my editor over at D Magazine, Mike Bellucci, who does a great job.
Yeah.
We were kind of talking stuff over about what we were gonna do for what some of the stuff he wanted to write about in August, and we were just kind of talking about the timing of why does this matter right now, and to kind of give people an inside baseball look at how stories, stuff, and everything like that. There's some ideas that you intentionally don't write in August because you want to save them for a more fleshed out time of the season, and you can write a better story. So the Oettinger story kind of came on where the first 6 players for each team at the Four Nation Face-Off were announced at the draft, and the Stars have 2 players already on teams. Miro Heiskanen and Esa Lindell will be on Team Finland. No real surprise there. The team brain trusts for Canada, Finland, Sweden, the United States are all kind of gathering this month to start working on building those rosters. They're not picking players this week, but they're starting to make lists that they'll work off of and try to get to kind of create a space where people are there, and so they have an idea of which players kind of are on the short list that can move up or down with their play this coming season. And the American goaltending situation is fascinating because you have the other 3 countries, you either have a established number 1, like in Finland with Jussi Saros, or you have a situation with Canada where you're like, I don't even know if you have a number 1. The Americans have 4 legit number 1 goalies right now to pick from, and 1 will not be going. And at this point, and this is the reason, this is kind of the crux of the article, was Jake Oettinger right now is the odd man looking out, and there's this first half of this season, his chance to kind of prove he should be in that top 3 American goalies. And it's gonna, for Oettinger, who's someone who I've gotten to know pretty well and covered quite a bit, he uses things like this as motivation. He's a very internally driven person. He wants to be one of the best goalies in the world, and this is going to be something that it's a storyline to watch this season with Jake Oettinger's play. Can he outplay essentially, can he outplay a Thatcher Demko or a Jeremy Swayman to get onto Team USA? Because it's kind of hard to think anyone uh, between what Connor Hellebuck did last season and what Connor Hellebuck has done in recent history. It's hard to see anyone Hellebuck not being there. So it's a big year for Jake Oettinger in that regard. And he's a guy who said he wants to be the best goalie in the world and one of the best goalies in the world. And this is the season he has to kind of prove that. So
you point out that NHL teams, the scouting is better than ever. The analytics are better than ever. In the article, you talk about Jeff Reese, the goalie coach. And I remember you and I talking last year about now is not the time to talk to Jake Oettinger about high glove side or high blocker side. And you point out the numbers decreased as far as save percentage in those areas.
mm-hmm.
As a winning goalie. Did I say that right? You did win a cup, right? Granted, it was a beer league. It was a beer league.
Beer league championship, but yeah.
But for the Spits and Suds purposes, you are a cup winning goalie. And you did get a day with a cup. So is now the time that Jake wants to work on this? And how do you work on it?
Yeah, I mean, you have off season is the time you tweak and fix your game, right? So Ottinger other teams, and it's in the article there, and Jake Oettinger was beaten above the gloves and blocker way more this season than he was the year prior. Part of that is shot selection. Teams shot there more. Part of that is execution. And I think it's something that you try to, there's only so much you can simulate in the off season, as far as game speed, and it's really hard to do that. So it's not like you can go through and rework it and be like, oh, we're going to get NHL quality game action here to work on this. The thing you can do is you can take a deep dive, and Jake's works with goalie coach Jeff Reese. He has his own personal goalie coach. He works back in Minnesota. You can take a deep dive and you can take a look, go under the hood and be like, okay, this is the problem. Why is this problem happening? And you can go through and try to assess and figure out what that is. Is it a glove positioning thing? Is it a hand positioning thing? Is it a play reading thing? I don't know what the exact answer is, but these are the types of things that Jake and his brain trust will look at as they try to figure that out. Is it because is he playing? Does he need to adjust his footing and depth in the crease slightly? There's a bunch of different things you can all mess around with and play with. And this is where you look at those and you try to go under the hood and figure everything out for it. And then you just have to hope that you can put it into play, because you could say like, oh, well, be better. To be better in October and November, you have to kind of figure out what the problem is now in July and August. And I believe that's what Jake Oettinger is working on, actually. So,
but he even admittedly said that he was so much better upon the arrival of Chris Tanev.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. He was, but he wasn't better in the areas I talked about, though. Like, he was better overall, yes. And the Stars were giving up less high danger chances. So I think that's one thing, but it also kind of masked the other part where teams were beating him higher more often than they were before. So I think Tanev helped some of the other stuff that they fixed in the season. It will be very fascinating to see how that all plays out with this coming season, since Chris Tanev is now a Toronto Maple Leaf. But Chris Tanev being there it's not like if you go and look at Jake Oettinger's splits, it's not like all of a sudden Chris Tanev being there made him a better goalie on the glove or blocker. Really what it did was it just limited the amount of shots he faced and the amount of high danger chances he faced. So nothing against what actually this is full credit to Chris Tanev. It's like, this is credit to Chris Tanev on how much he made Oettinger better, but it doesn't change the other problem. I think those two things are two separate entities here.
So NHL Network will release their top goalies. Starts tonight at 5 p.m. And like I said, they'll go through every position. The NFL does this. It's great to see the NHL is doing this as well. So the writers kind of put out an appetizer, so to speak, on NHL.com. Here were the goalies that they were mentioning vying for the top spot. They did it in alphabetical order, so it's not who they thought it was, just mentioning goalies. Sergei Bobrovsky, Cup champ Florida Panthers. Thatcher Demko, Vancouver. Connor Hellebuck, division rival Winnipeg Jets. UC Saros, division rival Nashville Predators. Igor Shesterkin, New York Rangers. Jeremy Swayman, Boston Bruins. Andrei Vasilevsky, Tampa Bay Lightning. Where does Jake Oettinger fall after that? And of those goalies, who would you take as number one right now, Sean?
So you had on your list, but let's go over the list real quick. So you had Bobrovsky.
Yep.
You had
Bobrovsky, Demko, Hellebuck, Saros, Shesterkin, Swayman, Vasilevsky.
I mean, I think Ottinger's probably right now. I would put him right after that group.
Okay.
I think their group is a little bit. It's probably expanded a bit farther than they needed to. Like, to me, your discussion right now is it's Hellebuck. It's probably your discussion right now for best goalie in the world is it's Connor Hellebuck. It's still Vasilevsky and Bobrovsky is. I mean, what Bobrovsky did this spring in the playoffs was amazing. Now Bobrovsky's a fascinating goalie because Bobrovsky is the guy who you're like, if you could tell me you're getting the best version of Bob, it's the goalie you would pick, but he has been streaky up and down. So how do you count for consistency, right? Like, this is a guy who literally almost lost the net twice in the last 2 years.
Right.
Now it is. So,
and not a fault of their own, but let me mention two others that are in this equation. One, Demko. Need to see a healthy all season long Demko. And the second one, Swayman. I want to see him as the take control one playing in the majority of games where all the pressure, similar to what Oettinger faces, where sure, he has a backup goalie, but at the same time, we all know Jake Ottinger's the guy. And Boston's kind of gone back and forth. This year, Swayman seemed to be overall the guy, but, you know, he did have a quality backup.
Yeah, but I also wouldn't hold that against Swayman because I think it's like the whole damned if you do, damned if you don't conversation where we've talked about the Stars, where one of the reasons Scott Wedgwood was such an efficient backup was he made life easier for Jake Oettinger. I think the best version of Jeremy Swayman is the guy who, when he's playing 40 to 50 games and then taking the net in the playoffs. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a question of how you want to use your goalie. And that's kind of this is a much larger question of how you plan and attack these things, like what makes sense and what doesn't for team usage and goalie usage. And for Boston, Swayman's going to have to play more this year. We're going to see what he can do because after the trade of Olmark and they opened up the money to get him paid more the following year. And I mean, like, you look at you talk about this list, and you talk about these names, and Ottinger's there. Oettinger has the ability to be in that top five. He certainly does. But right now, you have it's hard to go do the side-by-side comparison and say, I would take Jake Oettinger over Jeremy Swayman. I would take Jake Oettinger over Thatcher Demko. I would take over Connor Hellebuck. It's a hard sell, and it's a hard thing to go side by side down that list. And that's where you end up with him in his 7 or 8 spot. It's the injury. The big thing with Demko with the injury is like staying healthy is a skill. We'll see how he responds to the injury. Like, Demko's going to get the benefit of the doubt too, coming off that for me. Like, we'll see what he does coming off injury. It could derail him a bit. We all know Jake Oettinger dealt with some injury last year. And so maybe the scales switch on that this year, where Demko takes a step back after the injury and Oettinger being fully healthy takes a step forward. Maybe that happens. Um, it's uh, it's an interesting thing to play out. There's also like the funny, like kind of human element to this too, where, um, like that World Junior team in the World Junior team that I think it was
That
2018.
Ottinger played on?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
I
kind
think
of
it
the
was 20.
backup, right?
But the three goalies on that team were Ottinger, Swayman, and Joseph Wall,
Yeah.
right? Like now I'm not Joseph Wall isn't in the same. I wouldn't put him in the same tier as Swayman and Ottinger right now, and certainly not Hellebuck or Demko. But it is interesting when you talk about American goaltending right now. Like it's about as good as it's been in a long, long time,
Yeah.
and especially for this Four Nations tournament, like the Russians aren't there, right? There's no Russian team. So the Americans will have a decided edge in goaltending in every game they play. And it's going to take something really special for Jake to make that team. I've rambled a lot here, Gavin.
No,
Help
this
me,
is
help,
this is
help.
good because I love that this program is focusing on goaltending and Jake Oettinger because he's so pivotal to the success of this Stars team this year. If he's healthy and then playing at an elite level, which I know he wants to do, because the other aspect is we're talking about a contract year.
Yeah, and he is gonna if he can play the Stars. Let's talk about the Casey DeSmith contract real quick, just where
Yep.
this went. Right,
3-year
the
contract.
Stars signed 3-year contract, $1 million per year. Scott Wedgwood left for Nashville, took a $1.5 million year for 2 years to back up UC Saros in Nashville. Scott Wedgwood wanted more money to stay in Dallas, but the Stars put a internal hard cap of one. The backup goalie is going to make $1 million, and that was for flexibility this season, but it was also for flexibility for next year and the year after when Jake Ottinger's contract goes up, because we're looking at a guy who could see a raise to 5.5 million, and that's probably fair. If that happened, I wouldn't be surprised. But if he goes and has a groundbreaking, remarkable best goalie in the world type season, he could be making even more money. So it is he's already a rich man. He's an NHL goalie making 4.5 million per year, whatever it is. He can make himself an even richer man too this time next year with kind of delivering on his mandate here.
One of the other things I was going to ask you as a goalie is we talk about working on his save percentage, high blocker, high glove. I think he's pretty good behind the net, but is that something as a goaltender that can be really improved upon? Because, and I'm not talking just in Jake Ottinger's case, because of puck possession is so important nowadays, specifically in your own zone, I would think that would be something that NHL scouts would be looking at, general managers would be looking at as, yeah, we want an elite goalie, but at the same time, we want someone that can really control the puck behind the net.
I mean, it can be improved upon because Jake Oettinger has gone from a very poor puck handler to a decent above average puck handler. So yes, it can be improved upon. Um, it's not my biggest level of focus for him right now because I think it is at a level that is adequate for where he needs to be. If it gets, you can work and get better on anything, but yes, you can definitely improve it because it's gone from something that was a noted weakness, especially when he was in the AHL, to it's pretty good now. Like it's not it's so yeah.
All right, let's switch because you sent out a tweet during the week and you said this should be fun. It was Canada versus the U.S. in the 2024 World Junior Summer Showcase, and there was a Dallas Star prospect involved. 19-year-old defenseman for Team USA, Aram Menetian. He is currently playing for Boston College. He was drafted in the 4th round by the Stars in 2023. I know David Castile likes his game. David was telling me that one of the things he really liked was, although his offensive game didn't necessarily take shape too much at Boston College, he thought he got much better defensively in his first year with the Eagles. And so I wanted to ask you your thoughts as far as, is this a potential another prospect on the horizon for Jim Nill and the Stars?
I very much look at him as I watch him play and very unnoticeable for both good and bad reasons, right? Like unnoticeable for bad reasons because you're like, oh, there's not really much there to his game when he plays with. I know he had better offensive touch this year with BC, but like you watch him in these games with Team USA, you talk with top tier guys. I just don't see him as much of an offensive producer at the NHL level. Um, he is a like I kind of look at him very much too, and this is just these are the comps that people don't like when you talk about prospects, but to me, he's a Joel Hanley.
Oh,
And
wow.
there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's just who he is, right? Like he's a guy who if he makes the NHL, he's gonna make the NHL because he's gonna make the NHL because he has a simple plays a simple game and calms things down and keeps things going. But like, I mean, he's 5'10", 100 something pounds. Um, there's been some offensive pop there in the past, but just as it gets to the higher level, it's not going to be there. Um, so he's the guy who he's going to be a third pairing type defensive, or a 4A player, and really what it's going to come down to is he's going to be it's going to find out whether someone likes his game or not, and that's kind of the thing. Like we all saw, it's a good example, right? Um, a good example is
Of a
it could
prospect
be
that
like
just doesn't pan out,
no,
or
not a
ends up.
prospect that doesn't pan out. Like what's his name? Pretty good. He's not a defenseman, but who
Oh,
was the forward who was really good on faceoffs? Who was here? Played with Tampa last year. Center was real. Former Red Wing.
oh,
Luke
yeah.
Glendening.
Yeah.
Glendening.
Yeah.
So okay, what's the difference between Glendening and uh Glendening and like a Justin Dallin when he was here? Well, Luke Glendening had an NHL team put faith in him and like him, and he was in. And that there's so many players in the league. Like I think there's in the hockey world, there's such a line. There's a line between the 4A, quad A guys, whatever you want to call it, the career minor leaguer, and the bottom of the line NHL lineup. I think you could easily just flip those guys so often and no one would notice if they didn't know. So it just takes someone giving you the opportunity and taking advantage of your play in those 3 or 4 games and having a coach that likes you. That's what, and that to me is what the NHL path for Menetian or Mini. You and I were looking at the pronunciation guide before, like minute. How are we going on this one?
We're going
Min,
Menetian for now, but we did talk
yeah,
before the show. This could be a Heiskanen situation.
yeah,
We just have to see.
yeah. So he's he's going to play. He'll play pro games. He'll probably play in the NHL, but the question is, will he play 12 NHL games or 120 NHL games? That's kind of how I look at this kid. It's, um, that's not bad. Like, let's not sneeze at playing any NHL games. That is an amazing accomplishment to
Yeah.
be someone you're gonna get into that spot and everything. But I it's if you want the real dose of realism, it's I see a Joel Hanley type player if he makes the NHL.
One of the things that I did want to point out, and I'm going to continue to point out, is we have become prospect spoiled here, and that's a good thing.
And I yeah, it's prospect spoiled, and I am also I've admitted this on this show before. I have become the old man who like the get off my lawn old man curmudgeon guy. Like, and I get that. Like that is something that I have become because I've seen so many prospects and players that just I was a younger reporter writer and I was like, oh, they're gonna make it. They're gonna sure NHLer and quote unquote making it was 16 NHL games and a cup of coffee or whatever,
yeah,
right?
I
Like
mean,
it's the like the it's I've grown old and curmudgeon on prospects. I willingly admit that. So like for me, it's kind of why I don't like doing prospect ranking or rating stories myself because my true uncut opinions on prospect ratings is there's three guys that matter, and the rest I could find for an entry level contract in the AHL bargain bin. Like it's a very cruel and harsh thing, but that's just
Yeah.
how my view has become. Like of any prospect pool, people are like, oh, prospect pool, prospect pool. I'm like, it's you have your top three that could become impact players, or sometimes even less if you're a really rough team, the uh, and then the rest are just it's dime a dozen. It's who gets the right opportunity. So I want people to know that because it is not just on. I'm going. If you ask me about any prospect in the Stars pool beyond the big ones, beyond the big souls, beyond um, the Emil Hemmings and everything like that, I have a hard time getting excited about them as
Yeah.
impact players when I know you could go find a Gavin Bayreuther who, and now look at Gavin Bayreuther. Gavin Bayreuther is now signed in Europe for next year. So
Yeah, that was and coming
uh,
out of St. Lawrence University, that was a really nice free agent signing by Jim Nill.
yeah, and he was a nice little he had a nice impact on the team. He was a nice part of the thing, but no one ever is going to look back and say like, oh well, the Gavin Bayreuther signing changed the Stars or
Right.
anything like that. It's um so I want people to know that because it is something that I'm not trying to overly push or do on anything like on anyone, but just when it comes to prospects, I'm very much a there's a if you're not a have, if you're not one of the biggest names and you're not one of the guys who like looks at it, you're more than likely someone who is going to have a hard road to fit.
Well,
So
and this is why I like
I
Spits and Suds, because it
yeah.
might not be your focus, but Stephen Meserve of 100 Degree Hockey, who is the co-author of your book called We Win Here, he does a great job covering Texas, and him and I go back and forth, and I love getting his reads on what's happening in Texas. I think David's good at that as well, David Castillo. And the reason I say that is because me, Sean, like I like watching players in the juniors, and I've enjoyed watching highlights of Bixel in various leagues. But
Yeah.
to me, like the bread is broken in Texas.
Yeah.
That
And
to
that's
me
one of
is
the that's yeah,
yeah,
100%
that's where
Gavin.
you really, really see like, okay, I mean, what Maverick Bork did in Texas, you're like, okay, this is going to be good. Not that what he didn't do in the Quebec Junior Hockey League wasn't special, because it certainly was. Same with Wyatt Johnston in juniors, and
Yeah.
he just skipped Texas completely. But, same thing with Jake Oettinger, Jason Robertson. You can go down the list. The impact they had in Cedar Park, to me, was the sign that they can have a major impact in Dallas.
One of the hardest jumps a player will make in their career is is to the AHL. That's just the 100% the reality of it. It is the jump from junior or college to the pro game is the most difficult jump someone will make in their career.
Yeah.
There is the AHL to NHL can be difficult as well, but it's there is so much that gets like I think Menetian will be a good player for Texas. I think he'll fit there, and the question will be whether he is the choice for the third pairing in the NHL when he gets there now. And I think he could be. It's just I don't. It's hard to project what the roster will look like 4 years from now in that spot because of all things, right? Like, I mean, you can sign the next version of Matt
Yeah.
Dumba for that
Yeah.
too, and whatever that is in 4 years. So
Now,
I don't know.
I
It's
did want
it's
to
yeah.
bring up, because we're talking about this, is that Hemming going to the Ontario Hockey League, a lot of NHL teams putting their player in a college where they trust the system. Talk about the future of the ECHL, because different sports have multiple divisions, and there are players that do come out of the ECHL. But why hasn't that become a bigger feeder league?
Uh, to be kind of blunt,
Yeah, please do.
if you're at a spot where you can't make the AHL, you probably outside of goalies, like I mean, the amount of guys who go from the ECHL to the NHL is very rare and it's very limited. And um, just to be extremely blunt about it, like if someone is playing in the ECHL and they're not a goalie, I'd probably take him off the prospect list right away as an NHL future.
Okay.
It's just the ECHL is a development league. The ECHL is a development league for players who are hoping to be lifelong AHLers. That's really what it is. It's not really a development league for the NHL. I mean, with the exception being goalies, because there's only one net, and so you might have a actual goalie prospect play in the ECHL because that fits well. But yeah, it's the ECHL is, and this is like I've been yelled at before by some ECHL people because they don't like when I say this, but it's just true. If you're a skater in the ECHL, you should probably go to Europe, get paid,
Yeah.
make your money. Like I have a good friend. Let me pull up his EP.
And while you do that, I
But
used to
yeah,
and still are friends with a former AHLer, played for the Houston Aeros, and
yeah,
Aeros sent him down. I want to say Bakersfield was the ECHL at the time, or it was someplace out west, and it was like 3 or 4 games, and he had like 8 to 10 points. And
yeah,
I asked him about it because he did end up. He just went to Germany. There was more money,
yeah,
and he was just like, "There's nothing I can do in this league." And
yeah.
he's
So
like,
no, exactly. So like I grew up, I grew up in where I grew up in New Jersey originally before we moved. I had the guy my dad played soccer with, his son, who I became friends with, guy by the name of Mike Volman, who played in the he's played in Switzerland now since 2016-17. He played Division 3 college hockey as a defenseman and is played the last 7-8 years in Switzerland. Actually won a Champions League in Switzerland as a teammate with Julius Honka this year, interestingly enough.
nice.
I don't think anyone was expecting a Julius Honka name drop today. But Mike is someone who played Division 3 hockey, never had any, could have tried to go to the ECHL and made $200 a week or whatever, or $250 a week, because ECHL, that's what ECHL salary typically is. Instead, he spent the last 8 years in Switzerland and he signed there again for next year. And he's making, I don't know his exact salary, but him and I have spoken before about it. Like he makes 6 figures living in Switzerland, plays 2/3 of the games they play in North America, has his house and car paid for, and they only play on weekends. And it's like, it's luxury. Like if you are like, I get some guys are afraid to go to Europe and everything like that. And I don't want to, but it's, if my advice to someone who is an ECHL player and would be just go to Europe, see the world, make more money, enjoy yourself. Like that to me is the harsh reality of what the ECHL is, because it's a low paid league that's technically the third tier in the United States, but I would argue college hockey and major junior are better than the
Yeah.
ECHL, because while the depth is better in those leagues, you've got guys who have to be pros, but you're never having to defend a Macklin Celebrini in Allen. You never have
Right.
to defend a Connor Bedard in Toledo. Like, so I'm looking forward to the calls, Gavin, from the ECHL coming at us and yelling at us, because I'm being very harsh and unkind right
Well,
now,
I
but
don't.
it's
I
just
mean,
true.
if they do, I'll just point out that we have propped up the Allen Americans, and we'll have his head coach on soon. So, I mean, it's fine. It's fine. That's
Yeah.
what I love about Spits and Suds. We can express our opinion on anything because we're not affiliated with anyone. So that's what makes this program special. I did want to ask you, because this, I don't want to say it has to do with the Stars, but I'm fascinated with this because I can't remember this happening in today's salary cap era. Maybe you can correct me on 2 players. And what I'm talking about is the Leon Draisaitl negotiations, where they want to make him an Oiler for life, but you have Connor McDavid sitting, I think, with 1 year left at $12.5 million. And what is the price for Draisaitl? And I guess my bigger picture question with all these stars, young guns is how much can you go before you just become so cap strapped that you might have your superstars, but you're not going to go anywhere because you just don't have depth?
Yeah, it's a really great question, isn't it? What is hockey a can you win on the strength of just two guys? Well, Edmonton got kind of close this year but there was some good depth pieces and everything. And um I think you have to find a bit of the happy medium. You have to have a couple of those lead guys, and you have to kind of be able to cycle and push things through. I mean, it's easy and it's a cherry picking example to go with the team that won the Stanley Cup, but look at Florida, right? Where it's the they had they had the big names that led the way. They had the Barkovs of the world. They got the Kachucks who led the way, but then they had some really good depth pieces that went through. And this year, when those guys got paid, they're basically had to cycle them all out because all those depth guys went and got paid more. So, um, Edmonton, I think, can win with a ton of money to Draisaitl and McDavid. I think I having two great players can do that. It just becomes how good are you at finding the other pieces and the continuous rotation of the depth so things work well. Um, you you do have to avoid like one of the glaring examples is the Toronto one where you got four guys making more than 9.5 or whatever it is, and it's like, well, you've really made it hard to get some other things, but cap's going to go up and maybe the Toronto thing becomes less of a egregious thing. I don't know. We'll see. I just look at all of this from a perspective of you have to have the touch points that lead the way. You have to have that number one center. You have to have that number one D. You have to have a couple of these check boxes. And while you'd like to be able to save money to improve and do these other things, you shouldn't scrimp on dollars to think we're gonna improve our fourth line by not signing Leon Draisaitl a little more money or something like that.
Makes total sense. The article out right now on D Magazine, Jake Oettinger, the Stars and the chase for the best American goalie. If you want to get your hockey fix this weekend, you can through Amazon. Rent the Late Game movie. What else should we plug, Sean?
Yeah, always good if you're looking for some summer reading, read either book I've written on the Stars. We Win Here with my co-author with Stephen Meserve, or you can go and buy 100 Things Stars Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die. That one's out there, still out there. You can go find it on Amazon or wherever books are sold. So yeah, I'll plug that. Get some summer reading. Watch the movie. So do some summer reading during the day.
Right.
Put up your feet, grab a beer, watch the movie that night. That's my pitch.
Absolutely. Get your Sean Shapiro fix in, and we are grateful that he likes to join us during the summer for these. Really enjoyed today's program, just jumping around, talking about various subjects that are in the NHL news. Always a pleasure, sir.
Always fun, Gavin. Always fun.
And thank you, everybody, for listening and supporting as we continue to push out these episodes for you in the off season. Don't forget, if you're listening through Apple or Spotify, there is a space that you can leave a review. That always helps us, especially if it's a positive review. I went on the other day. It's so great. I'm very grateful. I know Sean's grateful as well to give this podcast 5 stars. Thank you so much. We truly appreciate it. And the other thing, especially during these summer months, if you can help the program grow, we're always tweeting out the episodes. Like today's episode will be tweeted out later today. So when you hear this, if you're on social media, if you can just spread the word about Spits and Suds, because our goal together is grow this great game of hockey right here in DFW. And for Sean Shapiro, I'm Gavin Spittle. We'll have another episode drop soon right here on Spits and Suds. Have a great day, everyone.